Okay, so we're back in a tool set now, and what I've done off camera is I've cleaned up those cobalts and installed the Legend Spawn plugin. Now if you want to learn more about the Spawn plugin and how to install it and use it, just go through the Legend Spawn plugin videos that are on my YouTube channel. And so I've just installed that and just ran through the configure, and we're ready to use it. Because what we want to do is that I want to stop laying these cobalts and replace them every time, and I also want to demonstrate using an actual waypoint instance instead of modifying the cobalt blueprint all the time. So that way we can actually have loot based on our blueprint, or we can have it based on a spawn point if we want. So for the rest of this demo, I'm just going to use the spawn point. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove the configuration off this blueprint because I don't want him spawning double the loot. Some from him and some from this. Actually, come to think of it, the system won't even do that. It'll use the spawn point if it's configured there and ignore this, but I like to clean this up anyway. So we're just going to remove both of these from him so he doesn't have them. And then we're going to use the spawn plugin waypoint. I'm just going to put it back here a little bit, and I'm going to fire up. I'm going to have this selected and fire up the spawn plugin. Now again, I'm not going to go through how to use the spawn plugin. You can read about that through our videos. And we're just going to have our cobalt, and just going to respawn every minute. There we go. That'll work. And drop loot, yes we want, and there we go. So now he's ready to spawn. Oh, and of course, because we're using the spawn plugin, we have to have this waypoint down and get our area tag, which we'll just call loot area, and update this guy's tag to match. And now we're ready to spawn. So again, I'm not going to go through what all that meant, but look at the spawn plugin videos and you'll see how all that works. So now this waypoint is going to spawn our goblin, our cobalt, but instead of now configuring this blueprint to spawn treasure, we're going to spawn treasure based on this waypoint. So I could use this cobalt, over here and over here and over here, and have them spawn nothing, but have this particular one spawn loot because it's based off this spawn point. So we're going to fire up the loot plugin while we're on it and edit a waypoint instance this time. And we get configuration for the waypoint instance. Now again, it's the exact same as modifying the blueprint himself, the exact same configuration. So what we're going to do, first I'm going to add back in the jeweled sword that we had in the previously configured on him directly. So we'll have that and the rusty alternate. And that'll be 100, add, there we go. So I'm going to leave the gold off for now and move on. So the next thing we're going to demonstrate is a dynamic item. So we'll click on this radio box and all of our configuration options change for the dynamic item. Now, dynamic items are probably one of the more complicated functions, so I'm going to try and explain as much as I can as we go. So what we're going to do, we're going to decide what we want to actually drop from this cobalt, and in this example I would like him to drop a magical short bow. And this magical short bow is going to be a level 1 item, which is really geared for, say, about a level 4 character. So it's going to be, fairly powerful. Not for something for the hands of a level 1 guy by any means. So it's going to be, a level 1 item, and we want it specifically to be a short bow, but I don't know what magical property to put on it, and I want the loot plugin to do that for me. So that's where dynamic items come in. Now, we can spawn just about anything dynamically, and we don't even need to say I want it to be a short bow. I could just say I want it to be a potion, or I want it to be a scroll, or I want it to be a weapon, or I want it to be some kind of armor. And you can do all of that through this. When you want to spawn a particular type of dynamic item, like you have it in your mind that you want it to actually be a short sword or a short bow or whatever, you would use the base item pull down. Now in this example, that's what we're going to use because we want specifically a short bow. So what it does is it gives you all these templates of different kinds of items. There's mostly weapons in here and things like that, and then there's different kinds of armors and whatnot and ammunitions. But we want a short bow. So we're going to select short bow. Excuse me. There we go. Sorry about that. I had to cough there. So yeah, we're going to do a short bow, and we want one, minimum quantity, maximum quantity is pretty straightforward, and we want this to drop 100% of the time. Now, do fill in these three on dynamic items, because remember back when we did a hard item, we could leave the chance blank, and you could actually even technically leave the quantities blank, and it'll just default to 1. Fill these in, because when you leave these blanks on a blank on a dynamic item, it actually means something, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but do fill these in for dynamic items. So these three fields are fairly straightforward. They're min quantity, max quantity, and chance. We'll get into some of the other options as we go, so I'm going to skip a few. However, one we do want to have is the property count. Now the property count in this example means these are how many magical properties I want on my short bow. I only want one magic property. So you can pick whatever magic property you want, but we want it to have a maximum of 1. The name length we're going to use, we're going to set this to 4, and what this is when you have a dynamic item, they're going to come out with a pretty static name, like short bow, which isn't very fun at all. So what you can do here is you can specify a name length, and it'll automatically generate a name for the short bow. It'll be some kind of interesting name, short bow of something or other, and that will be this many characters in length, and it will create a human readable word. It's not going to create a word like CYQB. It won't do anything like that. It'll actually be a human readable word. Again, it'll be interesting, probably not based on a dictionary word, but it will be a human readable word. So that's what the name length field is going to be for. So you always want to use something like that when you're creating dynamic items to keep them interesting. Ignore item group for now, because we are using an actual base item short bow. Item groups are for when you want to create something and you're not really sure what it's going to be. Like if you just want a weapon and you're not sure what kind of weapon that you want created, you can have it pick one itself. So we're going to leave that. Now, these checkboxes, most of these we're going to leave for now, but we will discuss this loot level. Now, these are important because these tell the plugin how powerful these properties should be, what level this item should be. And if you remember from the previous videos, we said that there are levels 0 to 8. The most obvious one that I can choose is the specific loot level. If I choose specific loot level, I can actually type right here an actual item level. So if I want this short bow to be a level 1 magical item with one property, I could just type the number 1 here. However, if I want to go even further dynamic, and I don't want to base it on that, I can use these other options. This other option, the CR loot level, what this means is that this number here, this item level, will be automatically generated based on the creature's CR. So their challenge rating, whatever this Kobold's challenge rating is, it's going to base the item level on that. So that's that, and the PC loot level is the same, almost the same kind of thing. The PC loot level is this creature is going to drop an item based on the level of the person that killed him. Now, if you remember back in the configuration screen for the loot plugin, there was that item levels number, and we left it at 4. That's where this comes in. If I'm choosing CR loot level or PC loot level or area loot level, what happens is that level, or it's actually not area loot level, just these two, what happens is these two numbers are divided by what we have in the configuration window currently 4. So if a PC is level 4, it'll divide that level by 4 and come up with an item level of 1. If the PC that kills this cobalt happens to be level 8, then what will happen is this item power will be a level 2 item, because it'll take the player's level 8 and divide it by 4, which is what we've got configured, and come out with the number 2, and the item level will be 2. These are not something you're going to use a lot. These are just something that are there for just extra in case you want to do something like that. The two that I use the most are going to be the specific loot level for the particular item, or an area loot level. This is something that is kind of handy. What I can do, and you'll see this in the documentation, is I can set a variable on the area and have that area be the loot level. And any item that's configured to use area loot level for generating the loot, it will base the item level off of that. So that way, if I have 5 different chests or 10 different creatures or whatever in an area, and they're all dropping, this area is designed for level 4 players or level 8 players or whatever, and I want particular item levels to drop on these guys. I don't have to go and modify them if I decide to change my mind. I can just change the area loot level variable, and it'll change the entire area, and all the items that are dynamically generated that have area loot level assigned will change to drop that kind of item level. So you'll use that one probably the most, and specifically, actually this one probably the very most, and then this one probably secondary. Anything with a specific loot level will override the area loot level. So if you have an area where all the items are level 1, and then you have like a boss guy who's going to drop level 2 items, you can have that boss guy be configured with specific loot level, and and then you can actually enter it in, which will override the area. So that's what these mean. So in our example here, we're actually just going to have a specific loot level of 1. So our item level is going to be an item level 1. So the properties on this is going to be one property at level 1. And that's what that means. And we're not going to use any of these other fields here for the moment. We're just going to have this short bow. So we're going to click Add, and there's our dynamic group item based on short bow. Sorry, I had to pause again there. Some coughs. So before we demonstrate this, we're going to actually add some more kind of items so we can demonstrate more of what dynamic items are. Now, we can have this short bow, and it might be kind of neat now if we add some magical arrows of a variety. And what we could do here is I could actually choose a base item of arrow and have those be a magical property, but we're not going to do that. Just for demonstration purposes, we're going to select an item group. So item group, we're actually, in this example, we're going to choose ammunition. And if you look in the manual, you'll find out what kinds of things are included in all of these groups, because the manual has a table that shows everything. Ammunition, this will be things like arrows, bolts, throwing axes, shurikens, all those kinds of range type ammunition. And obviously, yes, it may spawn darts which don't necessarily go along with the short bow, but that's my meaning here, is I just want to do this for demonstration purposes only, to show item groups. So for this item, we're going to have him drop some ammunition. Now, when it comes to item groups, everything else pretty much works the same. I want a minimum quantity ammunition, maximum quantity, chance, and all that stuff. But I'm going to discuss something about the plugin, and it's a little complicated, and the documentation does describe it fairly well. And that is the built-in quantities. So with this ammunition, we're going to not put in any quantity. Okay? We are going to put in a chance. I want it to be 100% chance, but we're not going to put in any quantity at all. Our ammunition is going to have one property, and we're going to give them 5 letters for their name. Again, specific loot level, and I'm going to just make these level 1. Okay. Now I'm going to add this, and I'm going to show you something about the 2DAs. If you notice here in the table, we'll see our ammunition, and the min quantity and max quantity says 2DA. What this means is if we don't enter a quantity under a dynamic item, it's going to use the built-in quantities in the 2DA file for the ammunition. And what this means is, depending on the type of ammunition that this creates, it could be a different quantity. And I'm going to actually open the 2DA and show you what that means. So I'm just going to close this for a second, and I'm going to open up the 2DA file. And the 2DA file, the 2DA file I'm going to open, there we go, is group member, this one right here. So I'm going to open this 2DA file. And in this 2DA file, now this is getting into a little bit of an advanced topic, but I just want to show what this means. We're going to look at some of the ammunition types. For example, this line right here, line 25, bolts. If you look over here under this min quantity OV field, you're going to see that it says 5, and max quantity OV says 10. When I am choosing a quantity from the 2DA, meaning I'm not selecting a quantity in the plugin itself, what's going to happen is if an ammunition type of bolt is randomly chosen, it's going to create between 5 and 10 of them. Same goes for bullet. If it randomly chooses bullet, it's going to create between 5 and 10 of them, and darts and so on and so forth. The difference here, or the thing here, that's important, is that if I choose a group type of ammunition, most of the times they're all going to be between 5 and 10, and that's fine and dandy. But what happens if I choose a group of like any item? I want you to randomly choose any item whatsoever. If I say minimum quantity 1 and maximum quantity 1 in the plugin, what will happen is if it randomly chooses a halberd, for example, and I hard code 1 and 1 in the plugin, it'll spawn a halberd. However, if it happens to be an arrow that it chooses, well, guess what? It's only going to spawn one arrow, which is not really that useful. So by leaving the min and max quantities out on an item group type item, I can let the system choose the quantity based on the 2DA. So if I do that and it chooses a halberd, it's going to be minimum quantity 1, maximum quantity 1. So it'll always only be one halberd. However, if it chose bolts, it could spawn between 5 and 10. Okay, so by leaving the quantity fields out in the plugin, I can get different kinds of quantities depending on the item it chooses. So we're just going to go back. Actually, let me get this out of my way. Close this 2DA, and we're going to go back to our plugin again, and we're going to edit our waypoint instance. So again, if I was choosing a type of if I was choosing a type of all items here, it could choose a halberd, it could choose some arrows, and as long as I leave the quantity fields blank, it'll choose an appropriate quantity. So we're going to put that, we're going to re-edit this because we're not done. Now, you may say to yourself, okay, well that's fine, and that makes sense, and I like the fact that, if it chooses arrows, it's going to be between 5 and 10, but let's say you're not happy with that. Let's say you want more arrows instead of, say this is set to all items, and say you want to continue being one halberd, but instead of 5 to 10 arrows, which is what's built in, you want it to be 50 to 100 arrows instead. You can do something like that. Again, you would leave the minimum quantity and the maximum quantity fields blank. But what you can do is you can use something called the quantity multiplier, this number right here. And what happens is this number here will get multiplied by the built-in quantity that it chooses. So let's go back and open up that 2DA again. Probably shouldn't have just closed it, but I'm going to open this group member again. And let's say that we're choosing arrows, and it chooses between 5 and 10. Well, guess what? If I have, say, the number 10 in that quantity multiplier field, it's going to create between 50 and 100 arrows. Okay, that's what that QTY multiplier will be. So quickly bring that up again. So right away you may say to yourself, well, wait a minute. If I do that, if I choose all items for my actual item, and I set this to 10, yeah, that's going to create between 50 and 100 arrows, but also wouldn't it create between wouldn't wouldn't it create 10 halberds because the number in halberd is 1 and 1? And the answer to that is no. The halberd is still only going to be 1. And the reason is, if you look back here in the 2DA, you'll see this other field called mult-exempt. And what this field means is that whenever you choose, or whenever the system chooses an item that has a quantity multiplier configured on it, if the number 1 is in the mult-exempt field in this 2DA, then it will not use it. It will ignore it. Okay? So you'll notice that the arrow has a mult-exempt of 0. However, the halberd here has a mult-exempt of 1. So what this means is when I'm in a plugin and I'm, I've got this set to all items, and I say 10 here, what's going to happen is if this chooses halberd, it's going to say, okay, well, what does the mult-exempt column say in the 2DA? It says 1. Well, if that says 1, then I ignore this, and I'm only going to generate 1. However, if it says 0, like the arrows are, it's going to go ahead and use this. So that's what mult-exempt means. So some items are actually multiplier exempt, and some items are not. So you can actually, if you're good with 2DAs and hackbacks, you can modify this 2DA yourself and choose what items you would prefer would be multiplier exempt or what wouldn't be. So that's great and fine and dandy. You've got that, and you've got some arrows. Now let's say, for example, you wanted to override that function. You wanted to generate 10 halberds, just for argument's sake, 10 halberds regardless. You wanted all the items in this potential group to generate and use quantity multiplier. You can check this checkbox here called multiplier exempt override. When this checkbox is on, even items like the halberd that have an exemption on quantity multiplier will get multiplied by this regardless when this is checked on. So this is an override for that function. So you may have to read the manual a couple of times to really grasp this, because it is kind of complicated. But in a nutshell, if I leave the quantity fields blank, I can have the 2DA choose what the default quantity of a particularly randomly selected item from a group should be. And if I prefer, I can have those quantities multiplied by a number if by default it's not exempt from doing that. If it is exempt from doing that, like some of the items in the 2DA are, then I can use this override to override that function. So again, we're getting into an advanced topic here, but it is something that you may find of value, and you should probably know about it. But that's how that works. Now, getting back to our original example, we're just going to have regular ammunition, but we're not going to multiply by anything, and we're not going to exempt anything. We're just going to let it spawn between 5 and 10 arrows, or 5 and 10 bolts, or whatever the 2DA says for the item in the ammunition group that it chooses. Okay. So we're going to leave the rest like that, and I'm going to have all these leave them as identified so we can always see what they are. So that will be for that. And we're going to just show one more. I'm just going to grab something from the scrolls and potions field here. I'm going to have one property on it, and again, it's just going to be a level 1 item. And we're going to leave the quantities alone, because I'm pretty sure the default quantities for scrolls and potions are 1 anyway. No quantity multiplier or anything like that. So we will add that, and now we've got scrolls and potions. So I think we're just about finished. We want to demonstrate actually seeing this stuff drop. So we're going to finish this, and we should have 4 different kinds of things drop. Now what's kind of neat is no matter what creature we put on this spawn point, be it the kobold or the goblin or whatever it is that we put here, whatever spawns here will have that loot, because we've configured it on the waypoint versus the blueprint. So you have your choice there where you want to do it. So for this example, we're just going to do it based on this, and we have this guy configured with the kobold. I'm going to actually copy this, because I like to have 2 examples and see the different things that we're going to get. So we'll just spread these guys out and do that. So there we go. We'll leave it like that, and I'm going to pause this here, go into the game, and get these 2 guys to spawn and defeat them and see what kind of stuff we're going to get. So we'll see you in there in a second. Hey, I just had to come back to the toolset for one thing because I did forget one step. When you're using dynamic items and you are having the system automatically choose a quantity for you, you do have to do one thing to your module. In the placeables category, there is this Legends Loot temporary storage chest. This has to exist somewhere in your module that's not going to be accessible to players. You don't have to have it on a per area basis or anything like that, but if you have a DM area or something like that, or some area that the players won't visit, place this chest down in a walkable area. I'm just going to throw it over here for this demonstration, and it can be anywhere in your module. It doesn't need to be in the current area, just as long as it exists. Have this chest placed somewhere, and that's just going to be a requirement. The reason for that is because what it does is when it randomly creates your treasure, it's going to make copies of it to the correct quantity, and if the item is stackable, the copy function likes to copy the entire stack, so it gets a little complicated, but this chest here will help with that issue and take care of it for you. So just have that in an area, and once you have that down, you can just forget about it. Just leave it there and not worry about it going forward. And that's it. Then we'll go back in game now and demonstrate these two spawn points. Okay, so we're back in game here, and our two kobolds should be spawning. There they are. And so we're going to demonstrate those guys. So we're just going to buff up a little bit. Keep forgetting to put a sword down, or a weapon down that I can actually use.
You shall soon trouble no one again.
But kicking them in the teeth seems to work pretty well for the most part. So we'll loot this, and we're going to get hopefully four different kinds of item. So we'll hit that, and as we can see, we do get them. So we still got our rusty sword. We didn't get the jeweled sword this time. We did get the short bow of Hajo. Right click on that and see what that's all about. Oh look, it's got extra range damage of type slashing, a randomly selected property. That's kind of interesting. And for ammunition group, it did create some shurikens. It created 7 of them. Shuriken of Atoar, so we can examine those. And they give off light. You know, sometimes it gives off some useless you know, abilities. But again, that's customizable. If you go through the manual and you'll read through the 2DAs, all of the 2DA files, you'll be able to change whatever properties you would like to be randomly selected. And the scroll that it happened to generate was a scroll of Cloud of Bewilderment. So that was that, guys. Now, an exact copy of that waypoint.
You shall soon trouble no one again.
Generated this guy. And let's see what he happens to have in his inventory. Ooh, and we got the jeweled sword this time, which is kind of nice. However, the short bow, remember we did choose a short bow every time. This one is the short bow of Wiko. And we'll examine that, and it's got an attack bonus versus evil +2. Kind of nice. This one generated 7 arrows, the arrow of Muja. And, oh, it was only usable by neutral characters. And this one had generated a scroll of whole person, which is kind of nice. So again, as you can see, it's randomly generating things based on your selection. So sometimes the properties are useful, sometimes they may not be. Oh, and we are respawning these guys every minute, so I better get out of the way here. So yeah, sometimes the properties are useful, sometimes you know, some of the properties may not be so useful. But what you can do, and this is all up to you, I've got a list of properties in here that was requested of me by the people who actually asked me to create this plugin. So I'm going to leave those properties in there, but if you want to change your properties, all you need to do is just modify some 2DAs and repackage up the hack pack. So in the next little video, I'm going to spend a few minutes just discussing how those 2DAs work and how these properties are selected. As you know, we simply just chose some random properties for a level 1 type item. So what happens is there's a level 1 type 2DA file, and all the properties that it can choose are listed from there. So it's pretty straightforward. I'll open up one of those 2DAs and just go through it real quick, and then move on to the next kind of loot that we can drop. So we'll see you back in the tool set in a few minutes.